If she can declare an open relationship after I caught her cheating, why did her face drain of color the moment I said I'd start with his wife? My name is Nick Parish, and I used to believe in loyalty. Funny thing about trust, it's like an electrical circuit. Everything works perfectly until one wire gets crossed, and then the whole system goes dark. I'm an electrician by trade, 35 years old, and I've spent the last 15 years building Parish Electrical from a one-man operation into the most reliable contractor in Cincinnati. My wife Lauren always said I was too focused on work, too serious, too predictable. "You need to live a little, Nick," she'd say, twirling around our kitchen in her yoga pants. "Life's not just about fixing other people's problems." Maybe she was right. Maybe I should have paid more attention to the problems in my own house. The first sign something was wrong came on a Thursday night in March. Lauren was getting ready to go out again, the third time that week. She stood in front of our bedroom mirror, applying lipstick with the precision of a surgeon. Red lipstick. The kind she used to wear when we were dating, when she was trying to impress me. "Where are you going again?" I asked from the bed, not looking up from the electrical schematics I was reviewing. "Out with the guys," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You know, Jake's crowd." Jake, my older brother, the golden child who never grew up. At 38, he still acted like he was 25, hitting the clubs every weekend, dating women half his age. He ran the residential side of Parish Electrical while I handled commercial contracts. Our father had split the company between us before he died, thinking it would keep us working together. Sometimes I wondered if the old man knew something I didn't. "Since when do you go clubbing with my brother?" I asked, finally looking up. She was wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, cut low enough to make me uncomfortable. "Since always," she laughed, but it sounded forced. "Girls are so petty and two-faced, Nick, you know that. Guys are simple, they don't judge. I feel comfortable with them." The way she said it made me feel like I was being unreasonable for asking, like I was the problem. "What about Sarah? Or Michelle? I thought they were your friends." "They are, but—" She shrugged, grabbing her purse. "It's just easier with men. Less drama." I watched her leave, the click of her heels echoing through our empty house. We'd been married 12 years, together since college. We had 2 daughters, Becca, 16, and Riley, 14, both staying at their grandmother's for spring break. The house felt too quiet without them. Something was wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the feeling sat in my stomach like bad wiring, dangerous and unpredictable. Over the next few weeks, the pattern continued. Every Friday and Saturday night, Lauren would dress up and disappear with the guys. She'd come home after midnight smelling like alcohol and expensive perfume, laughing at messages on her phone. When I asked about her night, she'd wave me off. "Stop being so jealous, Nick. It's not attractive." Jealous. The word stung because part of me wondered if she was right. Was I being paranoid? Controlling? Lauren had always been social, always the life of the party. Maybe I was just getting old, becoming one of those suspicious husbands who saw threats everywhere. But then I started noticing other things. The way she guarded her phone, taking it with her even to the bathroom. The new clothes that kept appearing in her closet, dresses and tops I'd never seen her wear around me. The fact that she'd started working out again, spending hours at the gym, coming home glowing and energized in a way she never was after spending time with me. My assistant Mary, who'd been with the company since the beginning, started giving me strange looks. She'd worked with both Jake and me for years, handled our schedules, knew our business inside and out. If anyone would notice something off, it would be Mary. "Everything okay at home, Nick?" she asked one Tuesday morning, bringing me coffee in my office. "Fine," I said automatically. "Why?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing, just, you seem distracted lately." Mary was 63, a grandmother of 5, and had the kind of intuition that came from decades of watching people. She didn't ask questions without reason. "Mary," I said carefully, "has Jake mentioned anything about, I don't know, going out with Lauren?" Her face went carefully blank. "What do you mean?" "She's been going out with his friends a lot lately. Clubbing, says it's easier than dealing with female drama." Mary set down my coffee and looked at me for a long moment. "Nick, honey, maybe you should ask Jake that question yourself." But I didn't ask Jake. I didn't ask anyone. Instead, I did what I always did when faced with a problem. I gathered information. The following Friday, I told Lauren I had to work late on a commercial bid. She barely looked up from her phone when I kissed her goodbye. "Have fun at work," she said. "I'm going out with the guys again." "Be safe," I replied, and meant it. Instead of going to the office, I drove to Murphy's Pub, the upscale bar and club where Jake and his friends usually hung out. I parked across the street and waited. At 9:30, Jake's silver BMW pulled up to the valet stand. My brother got out first, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a designer shirt that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Then the passenger door opened, and Lauren stepped out. She was laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his arm as they walked toward the entrance. There was an intimacy in the gesture that made my chest tight, the way she leaned into him, the way his hand found the small of her back as he guided her through the door. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, staring at the club's entrance, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe they were just friends. Maybe I was reading too much into a simple gesture. Then I got out of the truck and followed them inside. Murphy's was packed, the kind of upscale meat market that attracted young professionals and older men trying to recapture their youth. The music was loud enough to feel in your chest, the lighting dim enough to hide sins. I found a corner table with a view of the main floor and ordered a beer I didn't want. It took me 10 minutes to spot them through the crowd. They were at a high-top table near the bar with 3 other men I recognized as Jake's usual crew. Dave, a real estate agent with wandering hands and a wandering wife. Marcus, a divorced car salesman who thought he was God's gift to women. And Tony, who owned a chain of tanning salons and had the orange skin to prove it. Lauren was the only woman in the group, and she was clearly enjoying the attention. She'd positioned herself between Jake and Marcus, laughing at their jokes, touching their arms when she spoke. Every few minutes, one of them would lean in close to whisper something in her ear, and she'd throw her head back and laugh like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. I pulled out my phone and started recording. At first, it was just flirting. Harmless, if you were being generous. Lauren had always been touchy-feely when she drank, always the type to hug everyone and laugh too loud. But as the night wore on and the drinks kept coming, the boundaries started dissolving. Marcus had his arm around her waist. Dave was whispering in her ear while his hand rested on her thigh. And Jake was watching it all with the satisfied smile of a man who owned something valuable. Around 11 o'clock, they moved to the dance floor. I'd seen Lauren dance before, at our wedding, at company parties, at the few social events I'd managed to drag myself to over the years. She was good at it, graceful and confident. But this was different. This wasn't dancing, it was advertising. She moved between the men like she belonged to all of them, grinding against Marcus while Jake's hands roamed her hips, letting Dave pull her close while Tony whispered things that made her bite her lip and smile. The other club-goers were starting to stare, and not in a good way. My hands were shaking as I held up my phone, capturing everything. Part of me wanted to storm onto the dance floor to grab my wife and demand an explanation, but a bigger part of me knew I needed to see how far this would go. I didn't have to wait long. At 11:30, Jake pulled Lauren aside and whispered something in her ear. She nodded, giggling, and they started moving toward the exit. Not alone, Marcus was with them, his hand possessively on Lauren's lower back. I followed at a distance, my heart hammering against my ribs. They didn't go far. The Marriott was 2 blocks away, and I watched from my truck as the 3 of them disappeared into the lobby. Jake's arm was around Lauren's shoulders. Marcus's hand never left her waist. I sat in that parking lot for 2 hours, staring at the hotel entrance, waiting for them to come out. They never did. The drive home was a blur. I kept replaying what I'd seen, looking for innocent explanations that didn't exist. Maybe they were just getting a nightcap. Maybe Lauren was too drunk to drive, and they were helping her sober up. Maybe I'd misunderstood what I was seeing. But deep down, I knew the truth. My wife was cheating on me, with my brother, and probably with his friends. I got home at 2:15 in the morning. Lauren's car wasn't in the driveway. She came home at 4:30, trying to be quiet as she slipped through the front door. I was sitting in the living room, still fully dressed, waiting for her. "Nick?" She jumped when she saw me, her hand flying to her chest. "You scared me. What are you doing up?" "Waiting for you," I said calmly. "How was your night?" "Fine. Good. You know, just hanging out." She was swaying slightly, her makeup smeared, her dress wrinkled. She looked like exactly what she was, a married woman who'd spent the night in someone else's bed. "Where did you go?" "Murphy's. I told you that." She kicked off her heels, avoiding my eyes. "And after Murphy's?" "We went to, I think, Dave's place? I don't really remember. I had too much to drink." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "I should probably shower and get to bed." "Lauren," I said quietly, "look at me." She turned, and I saw something flicker across her face. Fear, maybe, or guilt. "I know," I said simply. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. Lauren's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, denial, panic, and finally, something that looked almost like relief. "Know what?" she whispered. Instead of answering, I pulled out my phone and pressed play. The video was crystal clear. Lauren grinding against Marcus on the dance floor, Jake's hands on her hips. The three of them leaving together, Lauren laughing as Marcus whispered something in her ear. Lauren watched herself on my phone screen, her face growing paler with each passing second. When the video ended, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Nick, I can explain?" "Don't." I stood up, pocketing my phone. "Just don't." "It's not what it looks like," she said desperately. "We were just having fun. It doesn't mean anything. Having fun." I repeated the words like they were foreign. "Is that what you call it? You don't understand. You work all the time. You never want to go out. You never want to do anything exciting." I felt trapped, Nick. I felt invisible. "So you decided to sleep with my brother." The accusation hit her like a slap. She took a step back, tears streaming down her face. "It just happened. We were drunk, and—" "How long?" I interrupted. "What? How long has this been going on?" She was quiet for so long, I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of girls' nights, that were really orgies, of coming home to me smelling like other men. Half a year of me being the fool who believed her. And Marcus? Dave? Tony? Her silence was answer enough. I walked past her toward the stairs, my legs feeling like lead. At the bottom step, I turned back. "Pack a bag," I said. "Stay at your sister's tonight. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." "Nick, please," she sobbed. "We can work through this. We can go to counseling. I'll stop seeing them, I promise." I looked at my wife, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time in years. The woman I'd fallen in love with in college, the mother of my children, the person I'd trusted with my life and my heart. She looked like a stranger. "Lauren," I said quietly, "from this day on, you're in an open relationship. Congratulations, you got what you wanted." Her face crumpled. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done pretending we're married." I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed we'd shared for 12 years. My hands were still shaking, but not from anger anymore, from something else, something that felt almost like freedom. Tomorrow, I would call my lawyer. Tomorrow, I would figure out how to tell my daughters that their mother was a cheating whore and their uncle was a backstabbing snake. Tomorrow, I would start the process of rebuilding my life from the ground up. But tonight, I was going to sit in the dark and plan my revenge. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my computer, researching divorce lawyers and documenting everything I could remember about Lauren's behavior over the past 6 months. Every late night, every new piece of clothing, every time she'd brushed off my questions or made me feel crazy for asking them. At 6 in the morning, I heard Lauren's car start in the driveway. Good. She was actually leaving. By 7, I was showered, dressed, and on my way to the office. I had a commercial electrical job to oversee at a new office complex downtown, but first, I needed to talk to Mary. Parish Electrical occupied a converted warehouse in the industrial district, with offices up front and our supply warehouse in the back. Mary's desk sat in the reception area like a command center, surrounded by filing cabinets, coffee makers, and the kind of organized chaos that comes from running a successful business for 15 years. She looked up when I walked in, took one look at my face, and immediately poured me a cup of coffee. "Rough night?" she asked gently. "You could say that." I accepted the coffee gratefully. "Mary, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Always am." "How long have you known about Lauren and Jake?" Mary's face went carefully neutral, but I saw the flicker of relief in her eyes. She'd been carrying this secret, and it had been eating at her. "About 3 months," she said quietly. "I saw them together at that restaurant on 5th Street. It was obvious they weren't just talking business." "Why didn't you tell me?" She sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 63 years. "What was I supposed to say, Nick? Hey, I think your wife is screwing your brother. You would have either shot the messenger or demanded proof I didn't have. I kept hoping I was wrong." "But you weren't?" "No, I wasn't." She sat down heavily in her chair. "I'm sorry, honey. I should have said something sooner." "It's not your fault." I meant it. Mary had been more than an employee over the years. She'd been a friend, a confidant, sometimes the voice of reason when Jake and I butted heads over business decisions. She didn't deserve to be put in the middle of my family's dysfunction. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to burn it all down," I said simply. Mary raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't sound like you." "Maybe the old me is dead." At 8:30, Jake strolled into the office like he owned the place, which technically he did, half of it anyway. He was whistling some pop song, looking well-rested and satisfied in a way that made my stomach turn. "Morning, Nick," he said cheerfully. "You're here early." "Couldn't sleep," I replied, not looking up from the invoices I was pretending to review. "Everything okay? You look like hell." The concern in his voice was perfect. If I didn't know better, I'd think he actually cared about my well-being. My brother had always been a good actor. "Just tired," I said. "Hey, Jake, can I ask you something?" "Sure, what's up?" I looked at him directly for the first time since he'd walked in. He was wearing an expensive polo shirt, designer jeans, and a watch that cost more than most people's monthly salary. His hair was perfectly styled, his face clean-shaven and confident. He looked like a man who'd never had a worry in his life. "Are you sleeping with my wife?" The question hung in the air like a live wire. Jake's face went through the same series of expressions Lauren's had: confusion, denial, panic. But then something else flickered across his features, something that looked almost like amusement. "What kind of question is that?" he said, but his voice had lost its casual tone. "A simple one. Yes or no?" "Nick, come on. You're being paranoid." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the same video I'd shown Lauren. "Because this looks pretty fucking clear to me." Jake watched the video, his face growing paler with each passing second. When it ended, he looked up at me with something that might have been regret, or maybe just annoyance at getting caught. "Look," he said, "it's not what you think." "Really? Because what I think is that you've been fucking my wife for 6 months while I've been working my ass off to keep this business running." "She came on to me," he said defensively. "She said you two were having problems, that you weren't paying attention to her anymore." "So you decided to help her with that problem?" "It just happened, Nick. We were drunk, and—" 6 months, Jake. It's been going on for 6 months. That's not, it just happened. That's a relationship. He ran his hands through his perfect hair, finally looking uncomfortable. "What do you want me to say? I'm sorry. Fine, I'm sorry. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I stood up slowly, my hands clenched into fists. "Sleeping with my wife was a mistake." "Don't get all righteous with me," Jake snapped, his facade finally cracking. "You want to know the truth? Lauren's been miserable for years. You work all the time, you never take her anywhere, you treat her like a piece of furniture. She needed someone who actually appreciated her. So you appointed yourself?" "I gave her what you couldn't." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because they weren't true, I had been working too much, I had been taking Lauren for granted, but because of the smug satisfaction in Jake's voice, like he'd done me a favor. "And Marcus? Dave? Tony? Did they give her what I couldn't too?" Jake's face went white. "How did you—" "I know everything, Jake. Everything." I stepped closer, close enough to smell his expensive cologne. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay away from my wife. You're going to stay away from me. And you're going to pray I don't decide to tell everyone in this town what kind of man you really are." "You can't prove anything," he said, but his voice was shaking. "Can't I?" I held up my phone again. "This video has already been uploaded to the cloud, along with some very interesting financial records showing how you've been padding your expense accounts to pay for hotel rooms and expensive dinners. You want to play games, little brother? Let's play." Jake stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Fear. "Good." "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "I want you gone. Take a vacation. Go visit Mom in Florida. I don't care where you go, but I don't want to see your face for at least a month." "You can't just—" "I can, and I will. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for Monday. We're going to discuss your performance issues. Unless you'd rather I just post this video on the company Facebook page right now?" Jake looked like he wanted to hit me. For a second, I almost hoped he would. It would give me an excuse to do what I'd been wanting to do since I saw that video. Instead, he grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. "This isn't over, Nick," he said. "Yes, it is," I replied. "You just don't know it yet." After he left, Mary poked her head into my office. "Everything okay in here? I heard yelling." "Everything's perfect," I said. And for the first time in months, I actually meant it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls and planning. I contacted 3 different divorce attorneys, scheduled consultations for the following week, and started documenting everything I could remember about our joint assets. The house, the cars, the savings accounts, the business. It was going to be complicated, but I had good lawyers and better documentation. I also made some other calls. To my sister Connie, who worked in finance and had always suspected Jake was skimming from the business, to Tom, Connie's husband, who was an accountant and could help me audit Jake's expense accounts, To my daughters, who were still at their grandmother's house, blissfully unaware that their world was about to implode. Dad? Becca's voice was bright and happy when she answered her phone. How come you're calling so early? I wanted to hear your voice, I said, and it was true. After the night I'd had, talking to my daughters felt like coming up for air. Is everything okay? You sound weird. 16 years old and already too perceptive for her own good, Becca had gotten my analytical mind and Lauren's social intelligence, a dangerous combination that was going to serve her well in life. Everything's fine, sweetheart. I just wanted to check in. How's Grandma's? Boring. Riley's been hogging the TV all morning, and Grandma keeps trying to feed us. When are we coming home? Soon, I said. Maybe we can do something special when you get back. Just the three of us. What about Mom? The innocent question hit me like a punch to the gut. How do you tell your 16-year-old daughter that her mother is a cheating whore? How do you explain that the family she's always known is about to cease to exist? We'll see, I said. I love you, kiddo. Love you too, Dad. You're sure you're okay? I'm sure. But I wasn't okay. I was angry and hurt and betrayed, and a dozen other emotions I didn't have names for. Most of all, I was determined. Lauren and Jake had made their choice. Now they were going to live with the consequences. That evening, I drove to the house Lauren and I had shared for 8 years. The house where we'd raised our daughters, where we'd hosted Christmas dinners and birthday parties, where I'd thought we were building a life together. Lauren's car was in the driveway. I found Lauren in the kitchen, sitting at the breakfast bar with a glass of wine and a stack of tissues. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red and swollen, her usually perfect makeup smeared. She looked up when I walked in, hope flickering across her face. Nick, she said softly, I'm glad you're home. We need to talk? Yes, we do. I poured myself a beer from the refrigerator and sat across from her. I talked to Jake today. Her face fell. What did he say? He told me it was your idea, that you came on to him, that you've been miserable for years and needed someone who appreciated you. That's not... She stopped, closed her eyes, took a shaky breath. It's more complicated than that. Explain it to me. For a moment, I thought she might actually tell me the truth. The whole truth, not just the sanitized version she'd been feeding me. But then she straightened her shoulders and looked at me with something that might have been defiance. You want to know the truth, Nick? Fine. Yes, I've been sleeping with Jake, and Marcus, and sometimes Dave, and you know what? I'm not sorry. The words hit me like cold water. I'd expected tears, apologies, begging for forgiveness. I hadn't expected this. You're not sorry, I repeated. No, I'm not. She took a long sip of wine, her hands steadier now. Do you know what it's like being married to you? Do you have any idea how lonely I've been? So you decided to sleep with half the city. I decided to feel alive again. Her voice was getting stronger, more confident. When was the last time you looked at me, Nick? Really looked at me? When was the last time you told me I was beautiful, or took me somewhere nice, or made me feel like I was more than just the woman who does your laundry and raises your kids? I work 60 hours a week to support this family. And I've been dying of boredom for years. She stood up, pacing to the window. Jake makes me feel special. He tells me I'm beautiful. He takes me places, buys me things, makes me laugh. He makes me feel like a woman instead of a maid. So this is my fault. Yes. She turned to face me, her eyes blazing. It is your fault. You stopped trying years ago, Nick. You took me for granted, assumed I'd always be here no matter how you treated me. Well, guess what? I found someone who doesn't take me for granted. Someone who happens to be my brother. That wasn't planned. It just happened. And the others. Marcus, Dave, Tony. Did they just happen too? She had the grace to look embarrassed about that. That was different. Different how? Jake thought it would be fun. He said I was too beautiful to belong to just one man, that I should explore my options. So he pimped you out to his friends. It wasn't like that. But even as she said it, I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. They care about me. They treat me well. They're using you, Lauren. Jake's using you. You're a trophy to them, a conquest, something they can pass around and brag about. You're wrong. Am I? When was the last time any of them took you out in public? When was the last time Jake introduced you to someone as his girlfriend instead of his sister-in-law? Her silence was answer enough. I stood up, suddenly exhausted. I'm filing for divorce on Monday. Nick, wait. I'm asking for full custody of the girls. That got her attention. You can't do that. Watch me. I have video evidence of you sleeping around. I have financial records showing you've been spending our money on your affairs. I have witnesses who will testify to your behavior. What do you have? I have rights. I'm their mother. You're a cheating whore who's been neglecting her children while she plays house with other men. The slap came out of nowhere, cracking across my face with enough force to snap my head to the side. For a moment, we both stood frozen, staring at each other. Don't you ever call me that again? She whispered. I touched my cheek, feeling the sting of her palm print. Or what? You'll hit me again? That'll look great in court. I want half of everything. The house, the business, the savings accounts. Half. You'll get what the judge decides you deserve, which given the circumstances might not be much. I'll fight you. Good luck with that. I headed for the door, then stopped. By the way, I'm changing the locks tomorrow and canceling your credit cards. If you want to keep playing house with Jake and his friends, you can do it on their dime. You bastard. Maybe, but I'm not a cheating bastard. I left her standing in the kitchen and drove to a hotel downtown. I needed space to think, to plan, to figure out how to rebuild my life from the ashes of my marriage. The next morning, I called my daughters and told them I was picking them up early. I couldn't bring myself to explain everything over the phone, but I needed them home. They were the only good things to come out of my marriage, and I wasn't going to let Lauren's selfishness destroy their lives, too. Becca and Riley were waiting on their grandmother's porch when I pulled up, their weekend bags packed and ready. They climbed into my truck with the easy affection of teenagers who still thought their parents were superheroes. Dad, you look terrible, Riley said with typical 14-year-old bluntness. Are you sick? Just tired, sweetheart. Where's Mom? Becca asked. She was supposed to pick us up tomorrow. Change of plans. I wanted to spend some time with you two. They exchanged a look, the kind of wordless communication that siblings master early. They knew something was wrong. I took them to their favorite restaurant, a little diner that served breakfast all day and had the best chocolate chip pancakes in the city. We sat in our usual booth by the window, and I watched my daughters laugh and tease each other, trying to memorize the moment before everything changed. Girls, I said finally, I need to tell you something. They both looked at me with sudden seriousness, sensing the gravity in my voice. Your mother and I are getting divorced. The words hung in the air like smoke. Becca's face went pale. Riley's eyes filled with tears. Why? Becca whispered. How do you explain betrayal to a 16-year-old? How do you tell your daughters that their mother chose her own pleasure over their family's stability? Sometimes people grow apart, I said carefully. Sometimes they make choices that hurt the people they love. Did you cheat on Mom? Riley asked bluntly. No, sweetheart, I didn't. Did she cheat on you? I looked at my youngest daughter, fierce, intelligent, uncompromising Riley, who'd inherited my stubborn streak, and Lauren's beauty. She deserved the truth, even if it hurt. Yes, I said quietly. She did? Riley nodded like she'd suspected as much. Becca just stared out the window, tears streaming down her face. What happens now? Becca asked. Now we figure out how to move forward, together. Where will we live? With me, if that's what you want. What about Mom? You'll still see her. She's still your mother, no matter what happened between us. But even as I said it, I wondered if that was true. Lauren had made her choice. She'd chosen Jake and his friends over her family. Would she fight for custody, or would she be too busy playing the single woman to bother with the responsibilities of motherhood? We finished breakfast in relative silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. As we walked back to my truck, Becca slipped her hand into mine. I'm sorry, Dad, she said softly. You have nothing to be sorry for, kiddo. I'm sorry Mom hurt you. I squeezed her hand, not trusting my voice to respond. The war was just beginning, but I wasn't fighting alone anymore. I had my daughters, I had the truth, and I had nothing left to lose. Lauren and Jake were about to learn what happened when you betrayed a man who'd spent his whole life fixing things that were broken. Some things, once broken, couldn't be fixed, but they could sure as hell be replaced. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Monday at 10 a.m. Parish Electrical had 5 board members. Myself, Jake, our accountant Tom, our lawyer Patricia Wells, and our biggest client Frank Morrison, who owned half the commercial real estate in the city. I arrived early, armed with financial records, expense reports, and a flash drive containing enough evidence to bury Jake's career. Tom was already there, looking grim as he reviewed the audit he'd completed over the weekend. It's worse than we thought, he said quietly. He's been skimming for almost 2 years. Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, cash advances that were never properly documented. We're talking about $40,000 minimum. Enough to press charges? More than enough. Patricia arrived next, followed by Frank. Jake strolled in 5 minutes late, looking confident and relaxed. He'd always been good at reading rooms, at charming his way out of trouble, but this time was different. "Good morning, everyone," Jake said, taking his usual seat at the head of the conference table. "Nick, you sounded pretty urgent on the phone. What's this about?" I looked around the table at the 4 people who would decide Jake's fate. Tom, who'd been our accountant for 10 years and had never liked Jake's loose relationship with company funds. Patricia, who'd helped us incorporate the business and had always been strictly by the book. Frank, who valued reliability and professionalism above all else. "This is about theft," I said simply, "and conduct unbecoming a company officer." Jake's confident smile faltered slightly. "That's a pretty serious accusation, Nick." "It's about to get more serious." I slid copies of Tom's audit across the table. Over the past 24 months, Jake has submitted false expense reports totaling $43,000. Hotel rooms charged to the company for personal use, dinners for non-business associates, cash advances that were never accounted for. Frank's face darkened as he scanned the reports. "Is this accurate?" "Completely," Tom confirmed. "I've triple-checked everything." "Jake?" Patricia's voice was ice cold. "Do you have an explanation for these discrepancies?" Jake was flipping through the pages, his face growing paler by the second. "There might be some accounting errors. Some of these charges were legitimate business expenses." "Really?" I pulled out my phone and connected it to the conference room's display screen, because I have video evidence that suggests otherwise. The footage from Murphy's began playing on the wall-mounted monitor. Jake and Lauren dancing together, leaving together, checking into a hotel together. The timestamp showed it was a Tuesday night, a Tuesday when Jake had submitted an expense report for a client dinner. "Jesus Christ, Jake," Frank muttered. "Is that Nick's wife?" Jake's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "I can explain." "Please do," Patricia said coldly. It's complicated. Nick, you can't show this. This is private." "Nothing about this is private anymore." I stopped the video and faced the board. "My brother has been using company funds to finance an affair with my wife. He's been stealing from this business to pay for hotel rooms and dinners while I've been working 16-hour days to keep us profitable." "That's not—" Jake started. "Shut up," Frank snapped. "Just shut up." He turned to Patricia. "What are our options here?" "Immediate termination for cause," she said without hesitation. "We can also pursue criminal charges for embezzlement and civil action to recover the stolen funds." "I vote for termination," Tom said. "Seconded," Frank added. "All in favor?" Patricia asked. 3 hands went up. Mine stayed down, not because I disagreed, but because I wanted to savor the moment. Jake looked around the table desperately. "You can't do this. I own half this company." "You owned half," I corrected. "Check your partnership agreement. Termination for cause includes forfeiture of ownership stake." "That's not legal." "Actually, it is," Patricia said. "You signed the agreement, Jake. You agreed to the terms." Jake stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is bullshit. You're doing this because you're pissed about Lauren." "I'm doing this because you're a thief and a liar," I replied calmly. "The affair is just the cherry on top." "Lauren came to me, Nick. She was miserable. She said you hadn't touched her in months." "Get out," Frank said quietly. "She said you were boring in bed, said you never satisfied her." I said, "Get out." Frank's voice was louder now, more dangerous. "She said—" I was out of my chair and across the room before I realized I was moving. My fist connected with Jake's jaw with a satisfying crack, sending him stumbling backward into the wall. "Say another word about my wife," I said quietly, "and I'll put you through that window." Jake touched his jaw, his eyes wide with shock. "You hit me." "I barely touched you, but if you want to see what a real punch feels like, keep talking." "Gentlemen," Patricia said firmly, "and them. That's enough. Jake, you need to leave. Security will escort you out." "This isn't over," Jake said, glaring at me. "Yes, it is," I replied. "You're done. With the company, with Lauren, with everything. You're a 40-year-old failure who's been living off other people's work your whole life. Time to grow up." Security. 2 guys I'd hired the previous week appeared in the doorway. Jake looked around the room one more time, searching for sympathy he wasn't going to find. "You'll regret this," he said. "The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner." After Jake was escorted out, the remaining board members spent an hour discussing damage control. Frank was concerned about the company's reputation. Tom wanted to audit everything going back 5 years. Patricia was already drafting legal documents. "What about your personal situation?" Frank asked as the meeting wound down. "This is going to be messy." "I'm handling it," I said. "Need any help? I know some good lawyers." "I've got lawyers. What I need is work. Something big enough to keep me busy while this plays out. Frank smiled, the first time I'd seen him look pleased all morning. Funny you should mention that. I'm breaking ground on a new office complex next month. 12 stories, mixed commercial and residential. It's a $40 million project. And you need an electrical contractor. I need the best electrical contractor. Someone reliable, professional, who won't steal from me or embarrass me in front of investors. Someone who's not Jake. Someone who's definitely not Jake. We shook hands, and just like that, I had the biggest contract of my career. It would keep Parish Electrical busy for the next 2 years and establish us as the premier commercial contractor in the region. As I drove home, to the hotel, not to the house I'd shared with Lauren, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Optimism. My marriage was over, my brother was out of my life, and my business was about to explode with new opportunities. My phone rang as I pulled into the hotel parking lot. Lauren's name appeared on the screen. "What do you want?" I answered. "I heard about Jake," she said. Her voice was different, smaller, less confident. "I heard you fired him." "The board fired him for stealing." "Nick, please, you're destroying everything." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm cleaning house." "What about us? What about our marriage?" I almost laughed. "What marriage, Lauren? The one where you sleep with other men? That marriage is over." "I made a mistake. I can change." "No, you can't. You made a choice. You chose Jake, and Marcus, and Dave, and whoever else you've been fucking. You chose them over your family. That's not fair." "Fair?" Now I did laugh. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you coming to me when you were unhappy instead of spreading your legs for my brother. Fair would have been you thinking about our daughters before you decided to become the town slut." "Don't call me that." "Why not? It's what you are." She was crying now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no desire to comfort her. She'd burned those bridges when she chose to betray everything we'd built together. "I'm filing the divorce papers tomorrow," I said. "You can fight it if you want, but you won't win. I have evidence, I have witnesses, and I have the best lawyers in the city. You'll get what the judge thinks you deserve, which won't be much." "What about the girls?" "What about them?" "I want to see them." "Then call them. Set up a time. But don't expect them to welcome you with open arms. They know what you did, Lauren. They know you chose your affairs over their family." "You told them?" "I told them the truth, something you seem incapable of." I hung up and sat in my truck for a few minutes, watching the sunset over the city skyline. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, lawyers, custody hearings, the complicated process of untangling a 12-year marriage. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. My phone buzzed with a text message from Becca. "Dad, we love you. Riley made cookies. Come home when you can." Home. Not the house I'd shared with Lauren, but wherever my daughters were. That was home now. I started the truck and drove toward my future, leaving the wreckage of my past in the rearview mirror where it belonged.